Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 119 of the podcast for May 31st, 2011. Today's podcast is produced in partnership with the Healthcare Value Network, and we're very happy to have Dr. Dean Gruner as our guest. He's the president and CEO of ThedaCare, considered by many to be a leading lean healthcare organization in Wisconsin. We're going to be talking about strategy deployment at ThedaCare, and this episode's a bit of a teaser for a DVD that has come out recently from the ThedaCare Center for Healthcare Value called Thinking Lean at ThedaCare, Strategy Deployment. So if you go to www.thinkingleandvd.com, you can see preview clips. You can purchase the DVD, a 40-minute production, and you can also see a link for a free white paper where leaders from ThedaCare, Group Health Cooperative, and St. Boniface General Hospital in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, talk about their use of strategy deployment as part of their lean management system. So as always, I want to thank you for listening.
Well, Dean, I want to thank you for taking time to do a podcast with us today.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Always good to talk to you.
So I wonder if you can start first, just give a basic introduction about yourself and your role at ThedaCare for the listeners.
Sure. So my name is Dean Gruner. I'm a family physician by background, and I serve as the president and CEO of ThedaCare, and have done so since April of 2008.
So we're talking today about strategy deployment, and I'm guessing listeners may know in general the use of lean within ThedaCare and the ThedaCare improvement system. But can you start off with maybe just a real high-level overview of what strategy deployment is?
Well, strategy deployment to us is trying to align the work throughout the organization from executive levels all the way down to the frontline people, and also trying to make clear what are the breakthrough initiatives to the highest priorities in an organization in a certain period of time.
And so can you tell us when and why ThedaCare started to incorporate strategy deployment into the management system, why you thought this is something that might be helpful?
Well, we sort of stumbled upon it over time. I think our earliest work, which really was not strategy deployment, but was trying on this alignment concept, was when we were trying to develop our improvement centers or our tracking centers, what people call our production control boards, and we wanted to create a standard about the columns or the lanes, if you will, for that work. So we started to do that. We had a lot of conversation about those lanes should be, and we eventually said that we're going to have 5 of them. There would be safety, quality, customer, people, and financial stewardship. Then as we did that, we really started to talk more about so that was probably 2006, probably about 5 years ago, when we really started to standardize that. A year or two, probably a year and a half later, probably it was winter of 2007-8, we started to use A3s and decided we're going to start using A3s, which we refer to as a PDSA, as our method for selecting our major breakthrough initiatives. And we did that, and as we did that, we then had to try to talk about what our true north metrics would be and how are they going to measure our success in our strategy. So it became a very iterative process where we evolved into taking the work at our breakthrough initiatives for our SD work and communicating that through the use of all of our improvement centers throughout the organization, and combining the visuals of that strategic work, of our SD work, with the frontline work of the columns that people have on their tracking centers. So the combination of those two things sort of meeting in the middle, now that people in our front line can visually see every day at their where they track their work, they can see how our big strategy issues connect to our True North metrics and connect to their work on the front line.
So you talk about alignment, and that's certainly a key theme with strategy deployment, and you talk about the need to have more alignment. If it's okay, could you talk a little bit maybe about some of what the current state had been when you were starting strategy deployment, why it was that you thought there was a need for better alignment, or what an example might be of an instance where the alignment wasn't as good as you would want it to be?
Yeah, well, the way I would describe the gap that exists today, but is smaller today than say 3 to 5 years ago. 3 to 5 years ago, on the executive team, we thought we did a great job of communicating our strategy. We'd go out, we'd talk to people using PowerPoint presentations, we'd have conversations. We thought we were going to do a great job. But if you ask people on the front line, to what extent do they understand the strategy of the organization, they would rate that quite lowly in low in employee opinion surveys. So on the other hand, so we're thinking we're doing a great job of communicating it, and we're getting feedback from employees that they don't really understand what the heck we're trying to do. And then we're further looking at it and saying, boy, if we're going to have to move faster as an organization, it's really important that people that throughout the organization all know what we're trying to do. So we have this sort of cognitive dissonance that we're thinking we're doing a great job. First time that's ever happened in an organization, right? That somebody thinks they're doing a great job, but getting feedback that there's a big gap. So what we've done with creating the visuals and trying to pull that into people's daily work is so that people understand more what we're trying to do, and then have conversations about it like, well, why are we trying to do this? So it's really helped us a great deal from that standpoint.
Well, and I think it's fair to say that's not a unique problem to your organization. I have a friend of mine, for example, he works in an emergency department at a hospital in another state, and we were chatting the other day, and we talked about strategy, and his first comment was, my colleagues and I have no idea what the strategy is. So it seems like that communication is an important piece for getting alignment. But can you talk a little bit more about the idea of measurement? You mentioned tracking centers. Can you sort of describe briefly what that looks like for you and your senior leadership team?
Right. We track a number of things. So we try to cascade from our True North metrics, which we use 4 categories. So we have a triangle, as we refer to it. So people here talk about the triangle. The top is safety and quality, and the center is the customer. Lower left is people, and lower right is financial stewardship. So when we take those 4 parts of the triangle and we take them down into the areas that each operating unit would be measuring, it flows right nicely into safety, quality, customer, people, financial stewardship. So at a high level, if we're trying to track productivity and our financial stewardship, and we're trying to measure our operating margin and our productivity as 2 big system-wide roll-up measures, then at an individual department level, people say, well, what are we measuring? Are we measuring net income or operating income? Probably not, depending on the department, but they would be measuring things like flat expenses per unit of service and productivity on their local level, so they can see how it connects to the big picture. If they're measuring people measures, so we measure engagement of our people, and we have that as a system-wide measure, and we also measure their health, what we call our HAT scores, our health risk assessment scores. So we know as a system we're measuring the health, but how is the health in their operating unit? What are the health of their employees? What's their OSHA recordable injury rate? So people can see the cascade of that, and they can look at that and say, well, what are we going to measure here for safety? What's our part of improving safety and preventable mortality, which is a True North metric, and medication error? So what is that? And what we find is when people ask those questions, then they're sort of self-aligning with the True North metrics. We say, well, geez, I can see what the system is. Now, what is our portion in this operating unit, in this business unit? What's our contribution to that? So in some areas, they've done a fabulous job. In some areas, we've got more work to do. But it starts those conversations about how their work rolls up to the organization's overall strategy.
Mm-hmm. So it starts with communication of that strategy, and then having measures that are aligned and meaningful. And then the other piece is aligning people's improvement ideas to those measures, to that strategy. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Well, that process is very much frontline generated. So we have a process that we've been doing better at over time, where employees identify improvement opportunities by sort of specifying what is the problem, why do they think it's happening, what is the potential solution, and then it connects to True North Impact, so they circle whether this is the safety, equality, customer, people, or financial stewardship issue, or multiple ones. The process then that we use is, as people generate those ideas in their huddles, they take those ideas and they use a pick chart to prioritize them. Because we can't put all of them in play right away, so they prioritize them on a pick chart by difficulty and by impact. And then after they do that, they sort of decide how many of these they can work on at once. So when they've got some additional capacity to work on a new idea, they go over to their pick chart and say, well, which of these now, based on the impact it has and difficulty and the area that it will address, which of these are we going to put in play next? And they put it in play, and depending on how complicated that is, it may be something that's just a few hours' work to put in place, or it may require more thought and a complete A3 or PDSA, or may more require even a whole week work of a rapid improvement event. But it helps people sort of, again, when they have to go through this improvement opportunity and they write it down and they have to circle it, which True North Impact it is, it connects it again to the overall strategy of the organization.
Okay, well, thanks for describing that for us, Dean. Maybe it's just a final question here to help wrap up. Now that you're a few years into this process, and you described it as an iterative process over time, can you kind of describe at a high level what some of the benefits are to the organization that you've seen from doing strategy deployment and from getting better at doing strategy development perhaps over time?
Yeah, well, when you're inside of the organization, sometimes you don't appreciate the benefits that much. It's because you're so close to it. You just don't see the forest for the trees sometimes. It's really when people come and visit us, which they do all the time, we consistently get everybody telling us that they can't believe how everybody on the front line describe what our strategy is and how everybody understands how their work relates to the big picture. And I sort of have come to take that for granted, like, well, of course, that's the way it's supposed to work, right? But that's not the way it usually works. Now, that said, we still have many opportunities for improvement. So this is not like we do this universally well throughout our whole organization of close to 6,000 employees. We're getting closer. And as a system CEO, I can't go out and meet with 6,000 people all the time. And if I do, I know that the amount of information they will remember of what our conversation is pretty small. So it's really in the daily work of them at a center where they're looking at ideas and problems and their problem solving, where you really reinforce that. So I think John Shook's the one that, and probably many people have said this, that it's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting. Well, this gets people actually acting in their regular huddles, using the process and reinforce so that it gets them to sort of act into a new way of thinking in concert with what the organization's goals are.
Well, great. Well, Dean, I want to thank you for taking time to give an overview into strategy deployment and sharing some of the great work you're doing there at ThedaCare.
Absolutely. It's always fun to talk to you, Mark, and if this can help other organizations improve their performance and their strategy deployment, always willing to do that.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.